If you don't know the goal of your podcast, you are going to waste an enormous amount of time, money, and energy. And that's exactly why we're going to get into the different types of podcast goals right now. If this is our first time meeting, my name is Rich and my team and I manage some of the world's top podcasts. Recent example is our launch of the Alex Morton Show, which exploded, and in 3 months he was in the top 100, and month after month he started seeing significant increases in downloads, which was amazing. That, and I've had 2 top 50 podcasts myself. I've been in front of and interviewed some of the world's top entrepreneurs, so you know I'm a practitioner. So if you, for even just a second, question what your podcast is supposed to do for you, I hope to give you clarity around that in the next few minutes. I've been sitting all day, so I wanted to stand and talk to you for some of this video. So look, even though we can make a lot of money from people who want our video podcast services, we turn them away based off their answer to the single most important question that we ask, and that is, why do you want a podcast? And that is my question to you, and that's where we're going to start. Why do you want a podcast? The answer to this question should be your first and most instinctive response. And I'll give you an example. If someone were to ask me why I wanted to be an entrepreneur years ago, I would say it's because I didn't want to work for people anymore. There was nothing sexy about it. It wasn't about financial freedom. It wasn't about making an impact. It was literally like I just didn't want to work for people anymore. And that's it. And the reason it's so important to go with that first instinctive answer is because you start making justifying reasons, or you start thinking of things that may sound better because you might think you're going to get judged if you're ever asked the question why you started a podcast. So before we even start, we want to just strip down any external influence so we have the realest answer to ourselves. And a lot of people probably wouldn't tell you this, but not a lot of people are going to support your podcast and not a lot of people are going to care about it. And the reason is they have their own stuff going on. So the realer you are now, the easier everything is going to be going forward. That's why your why is so important. And now that you have your why, you got to be smart. And when I say smart, I'm not talking about intelligence. I'm talking about a framework for goal setting. And there's 5 ingredients that make up this framework. Some of you may know this, some of you may not, but I want to cover it pretty briefly anyway. So the S in SMART is for specific. And the more specific you are about what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, the better. And this is going to be easy because you just covered your why. So for specific, you're going to answer the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. Why being the most important, and we already got that covered. So the M is going to be for measurable. How are you going to measure your progress? And like a former client used to say, if you're not tracking, you're slacking, because what gets measured gets improved. So what information are you going to use to measure your progress? Now, one note on measurable, you will need a baseline, and a baseline is basically the starting point. If I wanted to take my Instagram from 1,000 to 5,000 followers, then cool, I now have my baseline where I am, and I have the number that's going to let me know when my goal is complete. Super important. The A in SMART is for achievable. Is it realistic that you could achieve this goal in that time frame? Or is it too easy? Is it too hard? Whatever it is, you have to look at this as something that is doable, but also extremely challenging and is going to stretch you. Otherwise, if it's too easy, you will abandon the system altogether. So the R in SMART is for relevant. Does this goal matter to you in your personal life, in your professional life, for your business? Basically, this is you just asking yourself, do I really want this? Do I really need this? Does this make my life better? And the last one is the T, which is time bound. What is the start date? What is the end date? And let's just call it 3 months. If it's 3 months, then that's going to help you plan your daily activity, your weekly activity, and then your monthly activity, what you should be achieving by when. Let me be super transparent here. I do not use SMART goals for everything that I do, but if it's something that's super important to me or it's going to take a lot of time and effort, I absolutely do. And I recommend you do the same if you are going to take on a podcast or if you have an existing podcast and you weren't sure what the goal was. Now, in a second, we're going to go over the goals, and I'm going to try and tell you how much time and effort each requires, or at least compare them in that light. But if you've been enjoying this video so far, I would absolutely love it if you considered checking out some of the other videos. Our How to Start a Podcast playlist is legitimately packed with so much information, so feel free to check that out when you can. Now we're going to cover the top podcast goals based off our experience working with podcasters and being podcasters ourselves. That being said, these are in no particular order, but I did come up with an acronym that would help me remember it pretty easily, and it's BAITED. BAITED. And here we go. So the B is for brand awareness, and this simply means attention. You are seeking attention, and that attention might be from listeners, that might be from viewers if it's a video podcast. You are looking to draw attention to yourself because it makes you feel good, or maybe it's to your personal brand, or maybe it's to your business. Now, there's a lot of things that can be downstream of this goal, but this is literally just trying to attract the most attention possible. I'll give you an example. There's a client of ours who does millions of downloads a month, and he asked me the other day, he goes, why do I care about average consumption of an episode? And to me, as a podcaster and producer, I'm like, that is a key metric. It's huge. It shows the health of your podcast episodes and how much you're meeting your listeners' desires, so to speak. But what I didn't realize, and after digging a little bit further, was that didn't matter that much to this client. What mattered was that they got some value. So if they got some value in 5 minutes out of a 20-minute episode, they were good with that. So they just wanted to attract as much attention as possible, as many listeners as possible. Brand awareness right now is the immediate goal for that client, so we had to fix it. The A is for authority. Now there's multiple kind of levels to authority, and I'll cover 3 of them. First is ranking. Everyone loves an accolade. Everyone wants to say, I'm an Amazon bestseller, I'm a Wall Street bestseller, I'm a top 50 podcaster. I said it at the beginning of this freaking video. But look, that matters to some people. So that can help you be seen as an authority if you're doing something that a lot of people haven't. And just a quick pro tip, if you ever work with a company or an agency that says we guarantee you'll be top 100, you better run, because that is total freaking nonsense. Another way to demonstrate authority is by showcasing your expertise. There's this podcaster named Dr. Andrew Huberman, and he's got a podcast called Huberman Labs. His podcast essentially talks about biohacking, but with scientifically backed data. And it is popular, it is wildly popular, but he is clearly head and shoulders above everyone else who has a podcast similar to that. So he is showcasing his expertise. So if you are that much of a deep expert in your area, that could be a way to gain some authority. And the last way to authority is proximity. So I use this for sure. I've interviewed some of the top podcasters and entrepreneurs in the world: Gary Vaynerchuk, Patrick Bet-David, Chris Do, who's also now a client. We crushed for his podcast. But this absolutely enhanced my brand because they had a brand that was bigger than mine. They had podcasts that were bigger than mine. And because of that, it gave me social proof, and it also just demonstrated that I knew what I was talking about when it came to podcasting. Okay, now the I is going to be for impact. These are people who are not thinking about brand awareness, who are not consciously thinking about authority. These are people who absolutely positively desire to make a difference. An example of this might be someone who makes a podcast for life hacks for very busy moms. This could be a podcast about financial literacy. It could be a podcast about simplifying hard marketing processes like SEO. Now you may get authority or brand awareness here, but the goal is to help. Now I didn't say this for the other two, but for brand awareness, that's probably gonna take a ton of effort if you're not already creating content. It's gonna be a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of effort, probably a lot of money. If you're already creating, it's not gonna be that bad at all. The people we help the most are the people who are already creating content. It's like throwing gasoline on the fire. If you wanna be an authority, depending on how you go about it, if you don't go about it organically, it's going to be very expensive because you're going to be paying people to help with downloads, to help run ads, to help get you some of those top 100 spots, which we never advocate for. But in terms of impact, if you really truly just want to serve and you want to educate people, it's probably going to be low effort in the beginning because you are just being completely altruistic. Now, the tricky part here is if you want to measure that, it's not going to be super easy to measure with numbers, but what you can do is measure by basically the feedback that you get from the audience, meaning DMs, emails, people saying thank you, or that podcast completely helped me. Where has it been all my life? That's the kind of thing you're going to measure, but it's going to be a little bit challenging. But effort-wise, I think it's actually one of the best things because you're not thinking about some of these other overarching goals. You're just thinking about serving. Now, the next two I'm gonna kind of glaze over. The T is going to be for talkers or talking. You gotta talk. It is a creative outlet for you the same way artists paint, the same way singers sing. You need to talk, and you have absolutely no expectations about what you're doing except that it is a just place for you to go conversate with other people. I actually actually started that way. I just wanted to have conversations. I happened to record them. Now, the goal here is just to give yourself something of fulfillment. Now, there's probably nothing super tangible there in terms of goals, more than just fulfillment. You are fulfilling something that makes you happy. Like the same way people who like to run, same way people who like to go to the gym, it does something for them inside. Again, there could be byproducts from this, but you just want to talk. The E is for entertainment. These are people who want to entertain. This is like a podcast like Smartless, which is amazing. It's hilarious. They're entertainers, they're actors. That's what they do for a living. They want to entertain us, make us laugh, give us good conversations with other actors. Any of the true crimes that you find out there, these people want to entertain us with murder mysteries and these types of things. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Those are good goals. That's probably going to be measured very specifically in terms of downloads and listens and consumptions and things like that. But definitely identify if that's your goal. Now, if you identify entertaining people as your goal, obviously just the same advice we would give to everyone else. It is a slow burn, but if you keep at it, you will definitely hit whatever it is that you're looking for. Just own it up front if that's your goal. So the very last one is D, and that stands for dollars. Everyone is interested in how a podcast can be monetized. And I'm going to be the person who is transparent with you that there is absolutely not a lot of money in podcasting the traditional way, meaning sponsors. It's great to see Joe Rogan get a $250 million deal, but obviously that's just like on the way far end of the spectrum compared to most people. There's a couple models in which you could get monetized, and the worst, in my opinion, is cost per mil, or CPM. That's the cost per 1,000 downloads, okay? The average in the podcast industry is 22. So if you get 1,000 downloads, $22. Doesn't sound that great, but when you look at what TikTok pays out, what Instagram pays out, maybe it's not the worst in the world. So traditionally, not that great, but I'm gonna tell you the other ways that you could monetize that a lot of people do not consider. Now, just to reiterate, this goal is specifically if you want your podcast to make money somehow. And here are some of the ways. Lead magnets for your business, meaning it is basically you trying to walk people into some sort of sales process by highlighting your services, your product, your course. This is you trying to get the podcast to be a way to lead people to some sort of sale, or at least part of your funnel, meaning you want them to look at your products, look at your services, look at your course, whatever it may be. That is how people often look to monetize with their podcast. Now, using your own products and services versus someone else's is actually a great thing. It's going to make you work harder to be a better podcaster and to gather the interest that you want. If someone is sponsoring your podcast or backing your podcast financially, there's usually certain deliverables that you have to make, or a threshold of downloads or conversions, and you just don't want to be in that position. Now, look, podcasting was $1 billion industry as of just a couple years ago, and it continues to grow, but here's the non-standard ways that people usually don't think about in terms of making money from your podcast. The first is already been covered, that's selling your own products or services. The second is YouTube monetization. If you have a video podcast, which discovery on YouTube for podcasts is ridiculous right now, if you're able to get enough views where you can monetize your channel, that's obviously going to pay out. If you're not familiar with that, there's certain thresholds for the YouTube partner program, certain amount of hours, certain amount of views, certain amount of, I don't remember the rest, but you could monetize off your YouTube channel. Sponsors, non-traditional sponsors. Non-traditional sponsors is my favorite way to monetize, and that is basically when I use a brand or a service and I absolutely love them. I know that my audience or my listeners would love this brand also, and I know that this brand would want to get in front of my audience or listeners. And that is just hugely helpful. You never need a huge audience for that. If you have 500 downloads a month, but the lifetime value, meaning if this person who sponsor or this company that sponsors my podcast, if one conversion means, $2,000 in lifetime value, you might be able to get a $500 sponsorship per month. So that's non-traditional, and that I can get into a whole different video. And I promise you I will do that in the future. Another way that people sleep on is talent. If your podcast catches fire, or if it is in front of your ideal listeners, you might find yourself in a position like some of our clients where the talent for that business or your business or the help that you need starts coming to you rather than you going to seek it out. And any talent that you bring on board who's going to be consistent with your core values, who's who's a podcast listener who loves what you're about is going to do one of two things. They're going to save you money, save you time, or they're going to make you money, and you will love all of those. And that is a way to monetize, so to speak, but it's financially related. So I'm in. Brand deals, we kind of already talked about that in terms of sponsorships with businesses, but this is a little bit different. This is, hey, I only wear Target clothes on my video podcast, and that is a very large brand. They might give me a deal, give us this many shout outs per episode or this many shout outs per month, and we'll pay you. There's really no kind of requisite per se of like what they're expecting other than you just do what you said you were going to do. We have a client who has multiple advertisers that just kind of like request a certain thing read 30 seconds or 60 seconds per episode, and he gets a grip for it. So that's a brand deal. A book deal, you get a book deal. One of our clients, Mita Malik, who from Brown Table Talk, she was discovered because of her podcasts, and she got a book deal, and now she's working on her second book. Okay, she's getting to continue to spread her impact and authority because she's got a book deal. She caught their attention. You might not monetize off the book itself, but you can monetize off the attention. And the last one would probably be speaking fees or getting invited to keynote. Okay, getting invited to keynote usually involves travel, usually involves a speaking fee, usually involves pay, whatever you want to call it. People are going to pay you to get on a stage and talk. And if you are comfortable, just like you are on a podcast, talking to a room full of people, so to speak, and if you have a product or service or anything like that, and you close some of those at that keynote, not only do you make money from just having to go there, but then you get more loyal people who are going to fall in love with your brand or be listeners of your podcast. And the last one I say, and this is kind of monetization adjacent, but if you're doing really good by some of these podcast platforms, they may invite you to do part of their beta services. So it's not monetizing, but you would get invited to do things other podcasters don't get able to do. And if you do that and you do right by that podcast host, then that's obviously favorable and they have their eye on you, which is fantastic. So I hope you enjoyed this. Definitely let me know if this helped you. And if you want to see how 99% of podcasters fail, check out this video and you will save yourself a lot of time, money, and effort, just like you did by watching this one.